I'm here today to talk about engaging the commissioning team. My name is Jim Magee. I'm with Facility Commissioning Group. We're from Lexington, Kentucky. We have offices in Indianapolis as well. And I'm a current director with the ACG board. I'm the treasurer of EMA. And I'm also a continuous maintenance committee member for ASHRAE Standard 202. What I want to talk about today, I guess, has a lot to do with applying a more detailed look at, what it is we do regularly in terms of collaborating with others. This is AIA credits are available for this presentation for continuing education. And then I want to give credit to Unsplash for the open source images that I've used on my presentation. And I'm allowed to put my logo there, so I did. And basically what I'm going to talk about today is collaborative techniques for the commissioning team, and in terms of how complex jobs are, in terms of putting project teams together and different types of configurations that we do construction projects in, whether it's design spec build or design build, performance contracting, et cetera. We have to understand our clients as well as all the members of our commissioning team and the configurations under which everybody's operating. And in order to do that, I think we need to master collaborative techniques. Project commissioning teamwork coupled with consistent approach is what really leads to success in our field. And collaborative techniques enhance the teamwork approach that we advocate for doing commissioning. And then the other thing is interaction of ideas. So I'm going to throw some stuff out there, and I don't presume to be a sociologist or a psychologist or anything like that, but I think every one of us on a daily basis when we're out in the field or in design meetings, we operate on psychological principles and based on sociological pressures. So it'll be interesting as we go forward to interact with each other. So if you have some thoughts on some of the things I'm saying or something, I'd like to hear them, and hopefully at the end we'll have a little bit of time to discuss that. So when we're done today, you'll hopefully understand how collaborative techniques work and what we need to do as commissioning providers to encourage collaboration on our projects. A couple things about it, my presentation name, not to be misleading or anything. Engaging the commissioning team is a long-term commitment, but it doesn't typically lead to matrimony. So that doesn't mean that it won't, because I've had a project team or a couple project teams where people have gotten married after the project was over during the course of the project. Has anybody else, show of hands, seen project team members or commissioning team members get married before? No? Man, tough group. So engaging the commissioning team presentation is also not about hiring a commissioning team. What I want to talk about is how do we fire up the commissioning team? What kind of techniques and things can we use after we form the commissioning team to help us fire them up? And I'm going to talk a lot about process without getting too specific, other than I will go through some roles of different team members on the commissioning process. But basically, we're going to be looking at ASHRAE Standard 202 for the commissioning process, and we all apply ACG commissioning guideline third-party independence in our work, or most of our work, or some of our work. And then ASHRAE Guideline 1 and 1.1, the HVAC processes, and then ASHRAE Guideline 0. So when I'm talking about commissioning process, that's really the collective body of work I'm talking about, which kind of leads me to the thought that in 2018, ACG really needs to edit and revise our guideline. It's so old, it's from 2005. So I'm going to lead that effort with the association. Training guideline. So what I'm getting at is I'm looking for volunteers to help write the commissioning guideline. So if you're interested in participating in the guideline, Jim, I know you are, I'll put you down. Anybody else? Gotcha, Kurt. Good to see you. Sorry I missed you yesterday. But we do want to make that effort, and I think, if we come to next year's meeting, and one of our milestones will be to have a 2018 ACG commissioning guideline consistent with the JTAs, just like our workshop, also following ASHRAE Standard 202, include the system manual, that kind of thing. So that's where I'd like to see us, end up going as an aside. The only point of this slide is to talk about that in connection with all the different parties and people that we do deal with, and human personality, psychologies, and so forth. The commissioning process is a duration. It's a transient process that occurs in incremental steps over time. In fact, it's a redundant process to try to help you catch things at different stages if you didn't catch them previously as well. Those are all things that are group dynamic principles that you can use in collaboration. So our process is laid out in a collaborative method, and it's event and activities that occur over a long period of time. And then anybody who's taken a CXA workshop and has seen all the commissioning deliverables that come out of the standard and the guidelines I talked about earlier, you understand what those are, incrementally. And, we kind of tend to list them in order of how we execute them, and we kind of assign them as, commissioning deliverables, And, we're familiar with all the, different elements that we have to produce in terms of testing and training and documentation, as well as, systems manuals, warranty documents, preventive maintenance, and so forth. And the way we get about those deliverables and get interactive collaboratively from contractors is obviously through the commissioning specification. And the commissioning specification is a subset of the commissioning plan. You may or may not have a lot of the roles and responsibilities of owners or design team members or various commissioning providers necessarily in all the specifications, but the specifications at least have to include what contractor responsibilities are. And to that end, you have to get that incorporated into your commissioning plan and get good specifications put into project manuals so that you can then form a commissioning team based around the systems that you're going to commission, and hopefully defining the approximate extent of your testing and so forth, so that you can communicate a level of competence that you'll need on your commissioning team members. And then the key thing on that commissioning spec is to define those contractor roles and responsibilities so you can utilize those resources later when you're executing your commissioning plan. And most of you are also familiar with the commissioning team, and it really depends on what system you're commissioning as to who the members of your commissioning team are. This is a pretty standard MEP type commissioning team that goes together. I mean, the point of going through all this is there are a lot of different people involved on your commissioning team, depending on which systems you're commissioning, more or less. And then there's a lot of commissioning team members that often are not, listed discreetly and really need to be active members of your commissioning team. The one we found at Facility Commissioning Group recently that we weren't capturing well enough was all the startup vendors for equipment that we do, rooftop units and VRF systems and things like that. Here were, vendors that work for subcontractors who we really weren't doing a good job of capturing on our commissioning team. And if they weren't even listed on our commissioning team, imagine what kind of job we're doing communicating with them. So the thought process that goes into formulating your commissioning team should be, based on the systems you're commissioning and, the level of your testing you need to do. And you really need to put a lot of care into selecting the proper team to do that work. So I wanted to take a different look at the commissioning deliverables, because I think what we do a lot of times is we don't distinguish a lot between what a commissioning report is and what a commissioning plan is. It's just a report. We put it together. But in reality, the elements of your commissioning report and the deliverables of the commissioning process are all targeted towards certain people. And the question becomes, do we really look at the audience when we create the documentation? What type of person or what type of manager or individual is going to receive the OPR versus who's going to work with the commissioning plan all the time. And what types of documents are owners used to working with and designers used to working with versus what types of documents are contractors. So what I like here is when you're writing your commissioning plan, be cognizant of the target audience for the deliverables of your process so that you can collaborate with them at the level that they're operating in with the consistency and the comfort levels that they all have. All the different people, all the different personalities and everything else. So you see when you go through, another point that this exercise kind of proved to me was that when you get to the end of the commissioning process, when you're at the end of construction phase and you're into acceptance phase and you're moving forward, your target audience becomes the owner, because that's the object of the commissioning process, isn't it? To turn the systems over to the owner for use. So the very nature in which you communicate in delivering these things can really lead to opportunities for continuing services with the owner. And you can really see towards the bottom part of the list where, systems manuals to help them operate the buildings, warranties to help them understand the status after they've used the systems, preventative maintenance programs, energy usage evaluations. Those are tools you can provide to the owner that can be accompanied by, services later. So just bear in mind, not only the need to communicate differently based on different deliverables, but also the end result of those communications. So this is, kind of like the commissioning team paradigm you see in commissioning workshop and so forth, where we kind of have the spoken wheel kind of concept where the owner and the commissioning guy, we never really execute that paradigm. We think we do maybe sometimes. But it's real deficient in its explanation of what needs to be happening with the communication or with the commissioning team. And I think that's the case because it leaves out the communication. Now, we're all in Las Vegas, and sometimes in Las Vegas, you see things that you can't unsee, okay? Troy and I saw something that's going to bother us really bad on the casino floor for a long time that we won't talk about yesterday. But I'm going to show you something that's going to be hard to unsee. And what happens is we create this commissioning plan, okay? And we go through the effort of submittal review and developing system verification checks and looking at startups and working with, manufacturer documents and writing FPTs. And then we have a big kickoff meeting and we tell everybody what they're supposed to do. And then we leave the commissioning manual on site after the kickoff meeting, and this is what we do. Now, be careful. We expect everybody to communicate back to us, or some of us do, or some of us have. And the problem with the commissioning plan and the commissioning kickoff meeting is if the only time you're talking to the different people on your commissioning team is during the meetings, you're really not effectively executing your process, developing the relationships you need to develop, building trust, getting cooperation from people, because you're just handing out tests and expecting people to turn quizzes back into you, basically. And there's really no respect in that. There's no collaboration in just handing out a plan and saying, I'll be back in 6 months. This is what we should do. This is what we need to teach in the commissioning workshop. It's a very hard job to commission effectively. And the reason it's hard is because it takes a lot of time to communicate with all the people we have to communicate with. But it's not just going to happen. The good commissioning providers are facilitators. The good commissioning providers listen to their customers. The good commissioning providers reach out and communicate consistently at the appropriate level in the organizations with the right people. And it's the way you build trust. Don't just show up and do drive-by commissioning. Develop relationships, communicate constantly, make people I have to sometimes use somebody else's phone because they won't answer my call, right, because they see Jim Magee, so I'll use Brandon's phone. And I'll call him on Brandon, hey, how you doing? So the whole point of all that is that stakeholders must collaborate, and we're all stakeholders in the commissioning team, in the commissioning process when we do buildings. And I just put this image up here because it kind of, to me, reflects the irony of the fact that the purpose of the work that we do in commissioning building systems is to create collaborative spaces. What do? We create research facilities, we create hospitals, we create business centers. Everything we do is about creating collaborative space. And it's by definition social. And it's by definition communication intensive. And we as commissioning providers need to be very collaborative in how we go about doing our services. And I think that image kind of shows you that the end product and the method that we're going through is ironically the same. So these are the boring slides in the presentation, and they're kind of just rehashed out of the workshop, but I do want to go through them quick enough because one of the things we got to do when we're commissioning facilities is you've got to reach people where they are. And how do you reach people where they are? You develop relationships with them, you understand them, what their concerns are, what their focuses are, and what their roles and responsibilities are. It's not going to do you a lot of good to talk to an architect about the advantage of resetting your chiller temperature. He's not going to care. He's going to care if he's got a broken window on the 7th floor, So understanding who the people on the team are, what kind of information they're interested in receiving is very important. So when you look through the responsibilities for the owner on a commissioning team is OPR, right? Create the OPR, help the commissioning provider or the designer create the OPR, participate on the team, retain the commissioning agent. Of course, we want to work directly for the owner as early and often as possible, and communicate requirements to the design team. One of the biggest things that I see going wrong early on construction jobs is owners are not effective at communicating, or even more importantly, designers are not effective at listening what the owner really wants. That explains a lot of VRF systems I see in a lot of places they shouldn't be. That explains a lot of chill beam systems I see in places that, really don't need those types of systems. It explains a lot of the, maintenance intensive systems I see go into maintenance deficient school districts and so forth. And, understanding where people are coming from and what their important needs are is going to help you affect the process better. The architect is a high-level operator, the master builder. They're going to be the overseer of the project, but you need them in order to, get the, administrative functions done and to help you, define RFIs and understand changes on jobs. The designers, we all know what they do. They create the basis of design for the project. They respond to information requests, and they create change orders. Then you got your commissioning authority. I think we all know our roles. I already put them up there a little earlier, where we have the different deliverables that we have to produce, and most of us are certified, so I'm not going to really trouble you too much with the roles there. Construction manager. I think something that I really want to point out here in implementing the commissioning process, and I think we get a disconnect a lot of times because we write commissioning plans that are not necessarily completely consistent with the specs that we write, So understand that the construction manager and the direction that he gives to the contractors is going to be to do the commissioning process as per the spec. Everything they do is going to be as per the spec. You can't expect people to do anything other than what they're being paid for, and what they think they're being paid for is to do everything as per the spec. It accentuates the need when communicating with them to maybe even know the spec section or tell them where you're coming from when you're asking them to do things. It can alleviate a lot of communication issues that you have with generals if they think you're just coming in trying to boss them around. You can kind of help them work their way around the spec book and say, this is where I'm getting this is where I'm getting that thing. And once they're convinced that you're working under the spec, you'll get a lot more cooperation, a lot more respect both ways out of the situation. Of course, scheduling is in their role, overall completion, housekeeping, and so forth. We know the roles on the project. Mechanical contractor, just a specialized version. He has vendors and subcontractors like the tab agent that he may bring on board. They're going to have to, operate those systems during FPTs, probably using their control contractor to do that. They deliver O&Ms and deliver training, similar with the electrical contractor on the electrical systems. Temperature control contractors, again, we run into this so much that it bears discussing. They need to be on the commissioning team. Control contractors will very often try to take a subsidiary role where they're just going to let themselves be represented by another party like the mechanical contractor they're working for, or they may be direct to owner and they let the owner represent them. You really need a lot of communication with the controls contractor, and the reason is you need to have some type of control over what type of sequences of operations wind up in your projects. And again, you're going to be on solid ground if you demand sequences of operations that are in the construction documents. So if you've participated in the design phase and you don't have good sequences in your construction documents, it's going to be hard to do that. So that points out the need to due diligence and get good sequences into the document so that you can then enforce that. A lot of control contractors will disregard the specifications or the drawing sequence of operations, and they'll put in their canned programs, and they'll do that more times than not in some cases. And depending on the vendor, they may not even be able to execute the sequence of operation. That's something that you need to get on top of early and often. You do that with communication, you do that with requiring submittals early and so forth. So they also have to coordinate with the tab agent in order to get interface with VAV box, digital controls and things like that, or to manipulate boxes so you can do traverses and so forth. So temperature controls, communication, extremely important, and they should be participating in the commissioning meetings after the job's gone past the rough end stage of MEP construction. Tab agents, here at ACG we have sort of an affection for tab agents. A lot of us have test and balance backgrounds, but they're extremely valuable members of the commissioning team. I frankly think that test and balance is commissioning. It's just a component of HVAC commissioning. I think all of us in AABC understand total system balance, and that really was the precursor to full-blown, building commissioning and so forth. But we can work very closely and develop relationships, whether they're AABC or NEB or whoever they are. We know that they're challenged in terms of being coordinated with by the contractors and stuff, we can establish communications with them, let them know when things change on the job, or give them a heads up when things are causing you delays, or when you're concerned that, you know, things have changed that they might know about or something like that. So you can work hand in hand in that way. Another thing is you got a lot of vendors and testing agencies that you need to develop specialized team roles, responsibilities for. So that takes you through the huge list of issues that need to be addressed in terms of the roles of the people on the job and the different things they do. So I want to look at the commissioning plan as a tool, or really as a toolbox, where it's a set of tools that we build the commissioning process from. And we consider the commissioning team members as our clients. In other words, we might work for the owner, we might work for the architect, but every member of that commissioning team is your client. Because in order to collaborate, you're going to have to serve them effectively. That makes them your client. So you want to craft the process elements that are appropriate for the parties, like I talked about before. Consistency in your documentation, so things look neat, orderly, that they're consistent. Somebody can pick up that document and go, oh, that's an FCG commissioning document. And then also the consistency of your approach. Regular meetings, maintaining your commitments on the job, and being consistent in how you approach your work. The commissioning plan needs to be user-friendly. And a user-friendly commissioning plan is, you know, not something that's, you know, huge like that. And we can do things in our commissioning plans that can cut down. I'll briefly mention a couple of those here as I move forward. And we want to minimize redundancy when we execute commissioning process. And what I mean by that is you can leverage startups, you can leverage checkouts by contractors and different things to minimize a lot of the pre-commissioning and, you know, pre-functional testing type things that you need to do. And in some cases, you can even work with vendors to get functional testing done. So if contractors recognize that you're incorporating their resources in order to minimize their extra commitment to the commissioning process, that's a way of communicating with them that you value their time, you value their work, and you can work collaboratively with them, and you're going to get better results that way. If the tab guy is going through and writing down all the models and serial numbers on all the HVAC equipment in the tab report, why would you make the mechanical contractor do a separate list of models and serial numbers? Okay, that's the type of thing I'm talking about. Look at those things in your process and try to help out the user-friendly side of it. And seek collaboration. You know, I don't just take an FPT and throw it down and tell the control contractor this is what I want. I tell them, look at it, tell me what's wrong, tell me how we can use trending, tell me how we can do other things. We'll do it more efficiently that way. I may not like it or accept it, but at least we're talking back and forth and collaborating when we do that. It's really going to boil down to talk about collaboration being meeting. So I want to talk about some fundamentals about meeting with people. And first of all, when you start a project, and I think we all know this because as we go through the project, we develop friends, we develop people we don't like, and we need to understand that the meetings and the job itself is interpersonal. We're developing relationships with everybody on our commissioning team. So we need to learn people's names and use their names. You know, I'm not a name person. Well, become a name person. One of the most effective ways of communicating with somebody is saying, Stu, how are you? You know, it's a lot better than saying, hey, buddy, how you doing? I mean, that's not bad, but Stu feels good, doesn't it? You're used to it. You know, calling somebody by their name is a sign of respect. And if you don't learn somebody's name after you've met with them 6 times, that's a sign of disrespect. And that's not going to help you communicating with people. So we want to collaborate, we want to coordinate, we want to start commissioning meetings early in the construction process, have them often, and conduct really efficient meetings so we don't waste people's time. That's really what I want to try to do. And then we try to minimize their mobilization by coinciding with other meetings and stuff. You can set the stage for being involved in the project by going to the pre-bid meeting or at least going to the pre-construction meeting and establishing commissioning as an important part of the commissioning or of the project early on. And then helping contractors by participating in coordination meetings and pre-installation meetings is another way to be engaged and to really become a team player on the project and not just a pariah. So there's little things you can do, like whenever I have a commissioning meeting, we have an attendance sheet that goes out so that we can record who participated. It's important to spell people's names correctly. It's important, Brandon knows this because we've done it so much, to get on the internet if you don't know the official company's name. Just don't say Stewart, it's Stewart Heating and Air Conditioning. You know, respect people. They built their company, they named it for a reason. What I like to do is to do an initial blank attendance sheet, and then I follow this kind of a format where we just have a checkbox on all the meetings moving forward. So when I come back from my first meeting, we type up the attendance list, we get the checkbox action going. So the next time the guy doesn't have to sit there and write down 4 columns of information in the meeting, he just checks it and passes it on. And it's really neat because you leave blanks on the bottom, and the way we do our process, people will start, you know, writing their names on the bottom, and then you take it back and you augment it and you keep updating that list. And you name, company, phone, all the contact information you want, and continue to make corrections in this attendance sheet as you go through meetings and adding the names that need to be on there. Another thing we're consistent about is in our meeting minutes, we always want to list all the people who participated in that meeting. And it's really interesting because on some projects, like if you have owner personnel, it'll become a contest for some of them to end up on that attendance list so that their name can end up on the minutes. It's a demonstration to their bosses that they participated and they were active. I have project managers that a lot of time will bring along a lot of their younger guys in to the commissioning meetings when we do pre-installation meetings and stuff, because it's a way for them to learn how to do collaborative methods, and then they really want their name on that list so that they know that they were part of it. And then we do consistent format. I like the indented numbering type of format, but it really doesn't matter how you format things. What matters is that you state a purpose while you're meeting, and you execute that purpose when you meet. Say who's presenting, say who's recording. Sometimes that can be the same person. Preferably, it's better to have somebody to record for you and then, you know, do those minutes, because it's hard to capture your own minutes. But nonetheless, it can be the same. We always circulate an attendance sheet. And then we try to identify what goes on in the meeting in discrete steps. And you'll see this later in my collaborative slides, that we want to do things incrementally, but only one thing at a time. You just don't want to overwhelm. So we want to break things into discrete parts, and then we want to list out action items, you know, that need to be followed up on so that you can come to the next meeting, you know, and using those action items to drive that next agenda. System verification checklists are like that also. You know, this is a tool to interface with the contractor, so keep it simple. And there's no reason to go crazy with these system verification lists and try to impress the owner about how many different items you can put down on the SVC. Try to figure ways to consolidate so that you're also detailed, but you're also economical. We're not trying to create the Los Angeles phone book, you know. Templates and tables are really helpful in trying to minimize the amount of paperwork you produce. You know, this is a collaborative process where you're asking the contractor to do things to develop your property or your product to include in your commissioning report. So assist him if he's having trouble. If you're going to the job site and they're consistently not filling out the SVCs, get the book, walk out in the field with them, and find out where the issues are, what's hanging them up on doing this. I mean, they're helping you, so help them. And then don't forget about it. Don't do a kickoff meeting and leave the book and then expect to come back in 18 months and have it all filled out. Report the status of the, you know, commissioning plan every meeting. You know, I can see progress because these were filled out and it matches the observations I see in the field, you know, that type of thing. Or, you know, there seems to be a lot more work going on and very little work on the SVCs, that type of thing. So this is a good example of where you can take a concise format. You know, I could easily produce, these are little zone dampers, I could easily produce 10 pages on zone dampers and just give each zone damper its own page. Wouldn't that be great? Then I got 10 pages and pretty soon I'll have this great big report that will impress people. This impresses people more, that they can just sit down with one form, fill them out, you know, what you could end up, you know, what might you have, 200-300 terminal units? Do you need 200-300 pages of SVCs? Maybe you can just do that in 10 or 15 pages. It's a less, and it might even end up being the same amount of boxes to check and sign at the end, but because it's all on one page, it's less intimidating for them to get started. This is a little thing Brandon does a lot at our office. He likes to create a sort of a template, and this is the items that we want to look for in each of the lighting control devices that we're looking at. And we want to run this checklist item, but again, instead of, you know, how many, I got 1,000 fixtures on a job, so instead of doing, you know, 1,000 sheets like that, you know, we might do, you know, 40 pages of tables that consolidates all that. This is really good too because, you know, we get this checklist done and then we're also able to incorporate some other elements of switching and different types of things into the table. And it's just a lot less cumbersome to fill out. Another thing I already talked about equipment lists a little bit earlier, But we're finding on our projects that an equipment list is becoming an extremely important deliverable to the owner. A lot of them are moving into computerized maintenance management systems and doing things where they need to populate databases with their equipment. So we get a job, we naturally have to do a takeoff, we naturally have to come up with an equipment list. So we leverage that work into, turning it into, an effective collector of the data that we need. Now what we'll do here, like you see a lot of HVAC equipment, we can not necessarily have to collect that, we can pull a lot of that off the tab report, fill it out, and then collect the missing pieces. So there's efficient ways of doing this where you can just have, some of your office personnel, transferring information from startup reports, from test and balance reports. Your startup reports almost always contain model numbers and serial numbers. You're into data processing now once you've created the list, and you can just hand it over to get the information put in based on, O&Ms that you're receiving, startup reports you're receiving, test and balance reports, that type of thing. Of course, you could do the whole conference on all the new electronic methods that there are to make work easier for everybody. I don't know how many different e-communication systems there are. We got e-com, we got Procom, we got La Vista, we got software, we got web-based, we got everything going. And then cell phones are really powerful tools that we use too. Help the contractors. Maybe it's easier for a contractor to receive an iPad, fill out all his SVCs on an iPad. That might be something that really appeals to them. You might even put an iPad into the project and leave it with the contractor if you can afford to do that. But a lot of times you can put it in a project and leave it to the owner. That's another good way to deal with some of the, notebook computer type technology. And there's a lot of apps out there that you can get that does round stuff. Like we were trying to dial in exhaust fans that were really loud because they were bypassing too much airflow and trying to get the dB levels down through changing sequences of operation. Well, I don't have the money in the project to sit there for days with the control contractor, mechanical contractor while they tune it in, but I could help them download an app on the dB levels, and when they got them down close enough on the phone, then I could come in with test equipment and actually validate it. So use that type of technology. Almost every one of your contractors has a cell phone. Help them with apps that can help you, if that's possible. And I'll tell you something that I found that's really interesting too. In interfacing maintenance personnel and contractors, and this is really true with residential contractors, but there's a lot of platforms that are being built for construction software that go into computer-based systems. But I'm telling you that with contractors and maintenance personnel, I wouldn't even bother putting those apps on computers. They need to be on the cell phones. Because these guys, they do invoicing with their cell phones, they do everything that they do in the world. The cell phone is their computer. So if you want to really make a productive contractor and you want to use an electronic platform, use apps that work on their phones. You'll be amazed what the difference is between that and even an iPad. It's more about meeting people where they are and what they're used to doing. Turning on a computer and logging on and so forth can be intimidating, but they use their phone every day. It's the same thing, but they use it better on a phone. Go figure. So I'm going to wrap this up with the rest of my slides being about collaborative methods. And, I'm not an expert at this, but what was really fascinating was as I was researching this, how it does apply to everything we do on a daily basis. So the basic thing in a collaborative method is to do a group setup. And what we want to do, and this is what we talk about when we say build a commissioning team, is we want to deliberately set up a team. And we want to do this before the work begins so everybody is defined on what they need to do and how they need to incorporate our work into their work. And by setting up a team, we all agree, based on being commissioning agents and following process, that teamwork is a better approach. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that there can be 4 common group models that you can set up in your team. And I think that all of us, if we've been commissioning for any period of time, have commissioned in a group model commissioning team of each of these types. So the first one is chance. It's collaboration by chance. So what happens is you just show up and whoever's there is who you work with. Okay? Now, I know no one wants to admit that, but we know that happens all the time. Or, whether we tried to plan it out and people didn't show up or whatever, we show up and we work with what we got. That's a chance method. That's a chance model commissioning team. There's no regard to skills and there's really no concern for the needs of the members. It's just you're there, you're it. The second collaborative model or second group model is collaboration by acuity. And this, I think, is what we do when we try to set out on the commissioning team that we need a designer of record for each of the fields. We need a project manager and a superintendent for each of the trades and so forth. So what we want to do is we want to create commissioning teams based on a balanced set of skills, the skills that we need to do our work. To do that, though, you need to understand that there are 4 roles that people play when they collaborate. And it doesn't necessarily affect their role on the project. It's more of a personality thing. There are people who are conceptualists, people who are formalists, there are people who are operations, and there are people who are technicians. The conceptualist is the big picture visionary, doesn't worry about the details. The formalist sees those concepts and wants to chronicle those down into documents and wants to manage those. The operator, he wants to take all the rules and he wants to implement them and, run a team of people to go ahead and execute the formalized concept. And then the technician is right at the grassroots level. And we work with all these types of people and not necessarily in the same roles that you would think they would be. So we need each of those 4 acuities on a commissioning team for it to be well balanced. So that's the acuity model for group dynamics. Another one is an interest model, and basically this is collaboration by interest. So you say the commissioning team is composed of people with similar curiosities, careers, and hobbies. It's normally not the way you go about setting up a commissioning team, but it can be. I mean, you can get into mold remediation and be dealing with, health people and end up with a pretty specialized group of people. Or it could just be that nobody gives a damn and you're just working with the people who are concerned enough about it to be involved. But common interest to a related problem to be solved is really what focuses an interest group. The common and the unique knowledge is more important to them or to this type of a group than the balancing of acuity of the commissioning team members. What we want to model our collaborative methods in terms of group models when we form commissioning teams is the leader, collaboration by leader. And we want to choose the members of the team. And we really do have a say in that. We don't often exercise it, but we do have to push back sometimes when we don't get proper participation or when the appropriate people are not participating. But the commissioning team member in the leader role has compatible values, they have similar schedules, and they have common work environments. And we're doing that by mobilizing a subset of the commissioning or the project team in order to put them over into our commissioning team. And we need to also address acuity and interest when we do that. And we actually do that because everybody on the project has an interest in finishing the project. And as I said earlier, everybody has their own skill sets. So we want to collaborate by leader when we form our commissioning team. But these are common sense, and that's what's really good about reading sociology books and psychology books. The Cliff Notes version of my presentation, if anybody's getting a phone call, you can go out because this is the takeaway. This will be on the quiz. My takeaway is what this presentation means: be nice. Commission nicely. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Look for common ground with members of your team. Learn about others. You can look at the plumber and he stinks and, he, spits and he listens to opera at lunch. You didn't think he listened to opera at lunch, but, if you pay enough attention, you find out different things about people, And you should critique results and not people. We try to make things personal way more often than we should. What I do when I take minutes on meetings is I very rarely write down people's names. I don't say, Tom Foster said such and such. I say, the mechanical contractor. Or what I'll really do is I'll lay out a list of names and their company affiliations, and then I'll use the acronym for the company. And I really won't care which person said it as long as I attribute the company correctly. They can always fight about who said what later. It doesn't matter to me. Get the company right, keep the people away. Respect, okay? Respect occurs on 2 levels. One is you as the commissioning provider want to respect the members on your team, and at the same time the members on your team want to respect you. So there's 2 dynamics in groups. And you as a commissioning provider very often come into a group that's established, a project team, when you go into their meetings. So basically there are two schools of respect thoughts on meetings. One is the give all. Okay, that means that everybody in the group is going to give you all the respect in the world presumptively. And then you have to degrade your respect by your actions, okay? That's the least common in our line of work. The one we really deal with more often is the give none concept of respect. What that means is the group gives you no respect until you earn it. You have to come in and earn respect. And you can think about some of the techniques and some of the ways of presenting your commissioning plan and how you can earn that respect, but that's normally what we're doing. We're normally coming into an established group and we're operating on that give none respect process. Figure out ways to earn respect. And I tell you the key to earning respect, give respect, you'll get respect. And you can't respect people unless you pay attention to them and hear them and know who they are and how they are. So be explicit and clear. Don't be wishy-washy on things. You know, you as a commissioning provider, you got to be careful sometimes because people will run off and do stuff you say because they think you're directing them and you're not supposed to be. But don't be wishy-washy either. Stand your ground. Let them know what the spec says, what the commissioning plan says. You know, don't maybe it or brush this aside or whatever. You got to be firm and grounded in dealing with people. And then remember the 5 C's, which are 5 C's of communication: clarity, completeness, conciseness, concreteness, and correctness. I prefer the 5 P's. You guys know the 5 P's? Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So that's a good one. So Katzenbaum and Smith have team basics, and these apply if you think about the association, for example, and the fact that we form a board of directors or that we have committees that do things. Teams work best in small groups. Teams work best when you have complementary skills. If everybody on the team is a rower and you don't have anybody to call cadence, you know, you're in trouble. But if you're all cadence callers, who's going to row? Common purpose. And every project we have is a common purpose because at the end of the day, somebody wants to finish and cash a check. So we do have common purpose. And we can set performance goals. That's really something that the commissioning plan does. And if you're doing effective commissioning, contractors will look forward to your activities as milestones for their completion because it becomes very billable to them. And it even becomes something that they can demand substantial completion for and total payment for. So there are definite performance goals you can lay out in your commissioning plan and discuss in your commissioning meetings that work the group dynamic. And then share your working approaches. How are you going to do it? You know, I got a job where if Mitch shows up to be the balance guy on the project, I know that all the balancing is going to occur after midnight. Okay? That's his approach. I don't share that approach. And I can go to the mechanical contractor who doesn't share that approach, and the general contractor who doesn't share that approach, and the owner who doesn't share that approach, and we can lock the doors at 11:59. So, you know, work together to get the right approaches on a job and make everybody mutually accountable. You know, my firm has the motto that you achieve optimal performance through accountability. Understand that there are 2 fundamental working styles. There are alone, quiet, focused people. These are people who are self-paced, they're internal thinkers, they're driven by goals, they work in solo or very small inner circle groups. They're conscious of ownership issues, and they express themselves best by writing. The other type of working style is the shared high-energy dynamic style. They're fast-paced, they're external thinkers, they're conceptual, they're consensus builders, and they express themselves verbally. Do you see anything about this? Working styles are a built-in source of conflict in group dynamics. You need to understand who the introverts are and who the extroverts are, and use the group dynamic. Because introverts benefit from extroverts because they get to see expression of values, and extroverts benefit from introverts because they get to see grounding. My partner Todd and I could not be different. We're the total odd couple. We're Felix. He's Felix, I'm Oscar. You know, I'm always painting broad strokes and, you know, making things messy, and Todd's always doing very specific, neat, detailed things. But because I'm more extroverted, he's more introverted, we collaborate well together because we have complementary styles. What happens in the dynamic is you get these alone, quiet, focused people and these shared high-energy dynamics, and what you'll see play out is the aloners will become passive-aggressive when stress hits, and the sharers will become very aggressive. These are your screamers, your yellers. So what are some collaborative methods to avoid conflict? We want to manage expectations. That's the value of breaking things down incrementally so that you can achieve goals consistently. Don't move forward until you build consensus. I mean, you may have a few outliers and so forth, but you got to work on moving forward. Communicate effectively. Everything you do is about facilitating. And the best thing you can do is follow consistent process. That's why we have a commissioning standard, so that we can do the same things over. People will come to understand the routines and the methods, and they will respect them as part of the overall collaborative method. The thing you got to understand is most people fear conflict. I love conflict. I've made more money on conflict than anything I do, because if everybody got along all the time and went along, why would I need to commission anything, okay? Conflict's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, violence is bad, abuse is bad, but conflict per se is the breeding ground of ideas. When you have a group of people and a problem, and they don't see things the same way, there's going to be conflict because they need to work through the ideas. So try to context conflict in your commissioning meetings in the sense that it's brainstorming. Okay, when people start to get a little bit heated about it, you can step in and say, well, this is really good. We need new ideas. This is brainstorming. And you can a lot of times diffuse conflict by pointing out that it's valuable in the sense of that it creates ideas that you can then build consensus on and move forward with. Another thing to understand is that there's two types of thinking styles, and that kind of is different than introverted and extroverted. It's just the way people's brains are mapped. Some people are big picture people, and some type people are very detail-oriented people. And it can be people who do detailed work that are actually visionaries, and people who do very broad, complex works are detailed people. You just have to develop relationships with people and interact with them, understanding where they want to be. The other thing you need to understand is there are three basic learning types, and what you're really doing when you're commissioning is you're teaching the process over and over on every project, because that's how you get it executed. You explain it, you augment it, you monitor it, so forth. So the auditory learners are the ones who really depend on sound, okay? They listen, and words mean a lot. That's about 25% of the social dynamic. They're auditory learners. Kinesthetic learning is learning by touch, learning by feel, learning by spatial orientation, geometrical learning, all these types of things. 40% of the learning, by far the largest amount of learning, is kinesthetic learning. I, as a commissioning provider, do this all the time. Talk, 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 talk. You know what? A video goes a long way, particularly if it's a short, concise one. And that plays into visual learning. About 40% are kinetic learners, about 30% are visual learners. And men tend to be the big visual learners. You can see that here in Las Vegas when you watch in the casino. Watch how interested the men are in learning stuff. It's a lot of fun. So this plays into Spence's interpersonal communications. 52% of your interpersonal communication is body language. How I stand in front of Mark and Christy, relaxed, I know them, I'm comfortable, I'm not, body language is everything. No matter what's coming out of your mouth, your body language is 52% of what you're communicating. And your tone is 37%. So, I've already lost them before I even got to the tone, but look at what you do that's non-auditory in terms of your communication, and that plays in your meetings. Do you always have to be at the front of the meeting table? Do you have to have the head seat when you run a meeting? Do you have to go first, and so forth? Only 11% of what you communicate is words. And then another thing, too, you need to understand is in group dynamics, when you're working with your commissioning team, you might be talking to somebody and, like Mark, they're not even paying attention. They're looking at the screen, they're looking at Christy. But Mark might be an indirect learner. He might be somebody who doesn't have to focus. He's more comfortable kind of looking around, but he's still taking things in. So just because someone's not staring at you and giving you body cues doesn't necessarily know they're not learning. You need to figure out whether you're communicating with people by how they act after they've received the information and what they're doing. You can't just assume. People are indirect learners or indirect communicators or they're direct communicators. There are both types out there. Another thing about Spence's listening skills is, there's fundamental concepts that listening facilitates learning and shows respect to the speakers. And focus your mind on the person speaking. I like to walk and I try to look at a lot of people when I talk because I want you all to know I value you. I appreciate you taking your time to listen to me bloviate, but I respect you, and I think you all can see that, and that's why I feel well received a lot of times. Use body language to signal attention and interest, and verbally reflect when somebody responds. If somebody is really upset about something burning up in the mechanical room, don't laugh at the guy. Respect his feelings, and tell him it's okay. We're gonna move forward together. So respond appropriately to people decently. So what are the barriers to collaboration? The obvious thing and the number one thing is that it's difficult to achieve agreement when there's so many diverse opinions. But remember what I said. In a collaborative dynamic, conflict is often the breeding ground of the new idea that comes out to solve the problem. So we may start out not achieving an agreement, but by having dialogue and working together, you often can. Other things that are barriers, organizational rankings. It's a lot harder for the maintenance guy to complain to me about their hours that they're allowed to work when his manager's sitting in the room with them. It's a lot easier for me to discuss that when I'm one-on-one with him in training and so forth. Stranger danger, okay? What that is that someone may not want to share information with you because they just don't know you. And a normal human reaction is just to shut down and not give information to strangers. What were you taught when you were a little kid? Needle in a haystack, I love this one. Needle in a haystack is when somebody thinks that somebody else has already solved the problem, but they don't know who that person is, but they're going to find them rather than solve the problem. That's needle in a haystack. Okay? And hoarding is another one. Hoarding is when someone can solve the problem or already has solved the problem, but they don't want to do it because they feel like they'll lose power or leverage by sharing that with the group. And you can look in your groups and you can see who the hoarders are and you can see who the stranger danger guys are and so forth. And here's one, and this sounds stupid, but every one of us does this. It's not invented here, okay? What it is I'm not going to do it that way because I've never done it that way before, right? That's a number one impediment to a lot of organizations. It's kind of funny, but it is. And I'm going to close, sort of, with kind of like some of my list of characters from jobs. There's certain personalities. What I want to do when I'm talking to somebody and I'm working a commissioning plan or something is I need to identify quickly, is this person a singer or is this person a composer, okay? There's an answer to the question, and can they just tell me what that answer is? They're singers. They know the words, they can sing it to me. The composers, they're going to make it up. They're going to compose the answer as we're talking. And so understand when you're dealing with people who you are. Cult of personality is another one. You might end up with somebody in your group who is just an overwhelming persona that everybody looks to and defers to in all your groups. There's lots of strategies of dealing with cult of personality, but one of the best approaches is to become buddies with the cult guy, and then you gain acceptance in the group. But that could actually be the absolute wrong thing to do if that person is not necessarily friendly to your efforts. So you got to be careful. And undermining cults is very dangerous business. So there's a lot of psychology in all this. Horse trader, okay? Horse trader is the engineer or contractor who's done something wrong, and what we're going to do is this is going to be okay if we go over here and do this to that, right? We're going to horse trade a little bit here. And of course, none of that ever ends up on the as-built. It never gets off of your resolution tracking form. And we all know who the horse traders are. I try to identify them early on and let everybody in the group know who they are. What are you going to trade today, Mike? That kind of thing. And the envoy is the guy who knows absolutely nothing about the job, but he's come in to save the day. Okay? There's a lot of those guys. The guy on the site is just not working out, so we bring in somebody who knows nothing. That's your envoy, okay? I got a bunch of them. Car salesman's another one, right? Your car salesman, all he's ever trying to do is just sell you the job, right? Okay, we've done a checklist. Can we go now? Okay, let's, we're good to go. So maybe you can point something out to me here in a minute when I close. Last thing I want to say is that when Ed suggested this presentation to me, He wanted me to call it leading from behind. But I only think leading from behind does one thing. It makes you and... All right, so conclusions. Commissioning is a collaborative process. Commissioning authorities must manage teams of people, and we need to treat people decently in order to get the best out of them. Commissioning authorities do not hold contracts, so being nice is usually your best first strategy, you know. But besides that, all you can do is what? You know, so try to work with people. Collaboration enhances commissioning teams, and if you use some of these collaborative methods, or just look them up, hit Wikipedia like I did, or get one of these books that I've referenced, and look at collaborative methods, you're going to be fascinated by how much of that applies to what we do. Teamwork combined with a commissioning process will achieve your best results. Consistent process and teamwork. And commissioning authorities are facilitators, and respect is the currency that you deal in when you facilitate people. If they don't respect you, you can't facilitate them. And communication is the gateway to collaboration. So that's what I got. I appreciate your time. And if anybody's got any questions or wants to add any kind of characters, let me know.